Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie Yates, Anya Bwile, Steph Anya for short. This channel is for fellow therapists, those thinking of becoming therapists, and those who are simply looking to create their best lives. And today's video is another great one for all three groups. We'll be talking about cognitive distortions that can really get in the way of healthy relationships. For people who are looking to become therapists, this is something that could show up on your exam. And for those of you who are looking to create your best lives, you want to really do a self-assessment here and see if any of these cognitive distortions apply to you. What's on your mind? So let's jump right in. What are cognitive distortions? They are biases that link your cognitive schemas with negative thought. A schema is a core belief that we use to interpret events. Our cognitive schemas typically develop very early in life, and they can be either functional or dysfunctional. When I say that schema meets up with negative thoughts, automatic thoughts are the thoughts that we have at the surface level. They're surface level thoughts. It's not where you say, I need to go away and think about this for a minute. It's your immediate assumption or your immediate thought when something happens. I like to think of them similar to triggers. Like we see something or something happens and we automatically have this thought. Maybe we see a person, for example, who starts looking away when we're talking and we automatically assume that we're boring, right? So we're not taking into context everything that could be happening. We're just having these automatic thoughts, and they can be positive thoughts. Maybe you automatically assume that the person is tired, or they could be negative in things that kind of contribute to dysfunctional relationships and dysfunctional ways of viewing self. So now that we've got that out the way, let's talk about the common distortions that really impact our relationships and our view of self. So the first one is, I see this with couples all the time, mind reading. We assume that we can speak for someone else. We know exactly what they're thinking. Imagine when you're having a conversation with someone and you're sharing something, and then you go, I know what you're thinking. This was dumb for me to do. And the person is sitting there like, that's not even what I was thinking, right? But if they say, no, I wasn't thinking that, it's like, no, it's okay. You can admit it. I know that was dumb for me to do. Now, are you really engaging with a conversation with that person? Or is that person just a figurehead for your own projections? You know exactly what they're thinking. This is very related to the defense mechanism we talked about in my other video, projection. You just assume because you think something or you've heard other people say something that that's what the person is thinking, instead of truly giving them an opportunity to share what they're thinking. When we mind read, especially if we have a tendency towards negative thoughts, we're going to automatically assume that people don't like us, that people don't want to be around us, that people are jealous of us when we don't give them an opportunity to share what they're thinking, and more importantly, believe what they say. When you think you know what someone's thinking better than they know what they're thinking, that creates tension in relationships. And that's not a productive way to facilitate communication and understanding and authenticity in connection. Another common cognitive distortion, this one I see all the time, all or nothing. This is the idea of black and white. Everything is either they always do it or they never do it, right? So you come home and you see the trash isn't taken out and you're yelling, y'all never take this trash out. I'm always having to take the trash out, right? So you don't have any room for a gray area. It's always or never, black and white, if this, then that. So that is very similar to the defense mechanism we talked about in my other video, splitting. The cognitive distortion that really influences splitting is this absolute extreme way of thinking. Something's either always happening or never happening. And when we have those distortions, it can really get in the way of us giving credit when credit is due. If you're in a relationship and then something happens that you don't like and you say you never do this, you never do that, your partner is going to be confused like, Well, what about last week? And this is how arguments end up becoming these nitty-gritty arguments instead of talking about maybe that isolated incident, where you're just saying, well, I was hurt when XYZ, instead of saying you never do this. That's a very counterproductive way of communicating with the people that we love and care about. Another common distortion is selective abstraction. A singular detail of an event is taken out of context and emphasized, really to meet whatever automatic thoughts or core beliefs the person already had. So a little detail is emphasized and harped on, and the rest of the details are completely ignored. So let's go back to the example of you're having a conversation with someone and they are no longer making eye contact with you for a split second, or for a little while, you see them looking away. Maybe you know that that person was up all night studying for an exam. Maybe you know that they were anxiously awaiting their spouse to come. Maybe you know that they were already there for a part of the story that you're telling. Maybe you know all of those things, but the only detail you're focusing on is the fact that that person's eyes glanced away while you were talking to them. So you just assume, see, I knew I was boring. I knew they didn't really want to talk to me. And when you focus on that one little detail and ignore all these other facts that you know, then obviously your assessment of the situation is going to be very skewed and is going to contribute to tension between you and that person that really didn't have to exist. So selective abstraction is picking a singular detail, focusing on that, and ignoring all details that could possibly counter your perception of the event. The next common cognitive distortion: overgeneralization. You're drawing a conclusion that's not really justified by the available evidence. Overgeneralization, I think the best example of how it can get in the way of productive, healthy lives is when we look at something that happened one time and assume it's going to happen for the rest of our lives. Let's say that you were in a relationship and someone cheated on you. Maybe your partner has been very truthful, very upfront and transparent with you, and you've never seen any evidence that would suggest that they would cheat on you. But because it happened before, or because you've seen it happen with friends and family, you assume this person is cheating on you or will cheat on you eventually. And that overgeneralization can actually make you cut people out of your life who were actually very positive in your life. So that's something you want to be aware of, looking at the evidence of situations before you make a generalization. Another common cognitive distortion is personalization. With personalization, we take responsibility for everything that has happened in our lives, which if you have positive thinking, that could work out well because you're thinking, oh wow, I really worked hard and made this happen. But where I see it really becoming a problem is when we blame ourselves for every negative thing that's happened in our life. So let's say you lost your job and maybe you were in a bad relationship and you're like, looking at everything as if you had done something differently, you could have changed it. And in some situations, unfortunately, bad things happen and we don't really have control over it. But when you personalize everything and you take accountability for things really you had no control over, you're in a constant state of guilt and shame about things that you could do absolutely nothing about. And lastly, I want to talk about catastrophizing. That's where you take problems that are relatively minor and really blow them out of proportion. You look at things like, let's say you left your book bag at home when you went to school and you are freaking out, crying, you're upset, I'm such a failure, I can't believe this happened. And you just are blowing out of proportion instead of really stopping and looking at your options. Here are your options. You can either go home, you can ask your parent to bring your book bag, you can ask friends if you could borrow some of their books, you can let your teachers know that you don't have your book bag today and what can you do? Can you make up the work when you get home for the things you don't have access to today? Catastrophizing really gets in our way of strategizing. When you just look at everything as this overwhelming problem that has no solution, it really makes you complacent to just sit there and accept a problem and just pity yourself instead of looking for solutions and ways that you can overcome this problem. So catastrophizing is something I see all the time. It's something that definitely brings people into therapy. And sometimes my job is literally just to say, the problem that you're experiencing, I know right now it feels soul crushing and feels like your world is ending, but I've seen this before, and I want you to know that it is totally possible for you to be able to navigate through this. And most of my clients, just hearing a little bit of optimism, they start to believe that things could change as well. But sometimes people are surrounded by other people with cognitive distortions similar to the ones that they have. And if you call your mom and your mom is freaking out about the book bag and they're not thinking about solutions, then of course you're going to be freaking out and you feel helpless and you don't know what's going to happen next either. So catastrophizing can be a very, very detrimental way for us to survive in the world and for us to make decisions in our own best interest. So cognitive distortions, these are talked about in cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy, many would argue, is the basis of almost all therapy models. You're trying to help the client adjust their way of thinking and also adjust their behaviors, because both inform one another. Your thinking informs your behavior. People don't realize how much your behavior can also inform your thinking. So cognitive behavioral therapy is a staple of most therapies. And one of the recommended techniques to address cognitive distortions is to ask yourself certain questions. It's referred to as Socratic questions. Socrates is a canonized philosopher. I won't go into details about that and get too nerdy on you, but these are some of the questions that are recommended in instances where you might be leaning into these very negative cognitive distortions. Ask yourself, what evidence do I have? Sometimes I will literally have clients write out the evidence. So this is what you're thinking. This is what you're assuming is a fact. Now let's write out what evidence you have for that fact. And now let's really move beyond and see what evidence do we have that could possibly counter that fact. Because sometimes we're simply only willing to accept things that align with the thoughts that we already had. But to really work past cognitive distortions, we have to be willing to look at the evidence that counters those thoughts that we already have. What other interpretations can you make? So for example, when we were talking about that selective abstraction, where you're talking to a person and they start looking away. Now, what are other interpretations? Maybe they remembered something that they forgot to do at home. Maybe they're exhausted. Maybe there's something they really needed to talk to you about, but they were being polite and letting you go first. Maybe that's just a moment for you to ask them if everything is okay. What are other interpretations of these things that you're saying? And could that be a more plausible understanding of what's happening instead of the thing that you default to, whether that be people don't like me, I'm boring, everybody in this world is evil, every person I'm with is going to cheat on me? These are cognitive distortions because they're looking at limited evidence and you really are looking for things to support the way that you were already thinking. But allow yourself to think beyond your automatic thoughts and consider other possibilities. So these are some of the cognitive distortions that I see negatively impacting people's lives. Let me know which of these cognitive distortions would you say has applied the most to you or has affected your life the most, maybe at the hand of someone else. Again, my name is Stephanie Yates Anya, Steph Anya for short. I truly appreciate you for watching this video until the end. I ask that you subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you so much for watching.